Good morning, everyone. We are so excited to have you with us. We are speaking with the director of Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. It's Guillermo del Toro. Hello, Guillermo.
Hello, good to see you. And I directed with Mark Gustafson, but he's stuck at the airport, so I'll do my best to represent us both.
I am sure Mark is disappointed that he can't be here, but you guys have been on the circuit talking about this movie for a little while now, so you have it down pat, right?
Yes, quite so.
Um, my understanding is this film was 15 years in the making.
Maybe even a little more. Maybe even a little more. I started alone in 2004, triggered by the drawings of the artist Chris Grimley, who did a version of Pinocchio that was very, very good. And I started to develop it with him, co-writing with my partner Matthew Robbins and producing, and Chris was going to direct it. And I started emptying all the ideas into it, and that version didn't go through, was rejected by everyone. And then I started again, this time with me directing and co-writing with Patrick McHale. And that version was rejected again by the same studios. Every studio in town rejected us on both versions, and we had no possibility of getting it made until right before we went into international financing, which is basically film piracy. I had the idea of talking to Ted Sarandos at Netflix because I had a very good experience with them in a TV series, animated TV series called Troll Hunters Tales of Arcadia, which ran through three different series interconnected, about 80 something episodes and a feature. It was all very creatively free, and Ted knew what I would bring to the table in animation, and he said yes. So that was about 2008, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Yeah, about 15, 18 years.
We had a resident, Stephen, wrote in and asked if you were influenced by the actual fairy tale from the 1850s.
Yeah, well, everybody on board read the book, and I read it in my 20s, and then I read it again before tackling this movie. And there are many curious things around it. I mean, Collodi and I share the fact that we were raised very Catholic. Carlo Collodi, at one point was studying to be a priest, and he didn't follow through, didn't become a priest, but he was very close at choosing it. And we have in common a very strange sense of humor and a proclivity to strange images. A lot of the beats in the movie come from that book. Some beats that have never been done before, to my knowledge. The Black Rabbits of Death, who in the book carry Pinocchio during a fever bout, in a coffin. That came from the book. In ours, since Pinocchio dies many times, which is unique to our tale, they appear. Crushing the cricket repeatedly, that comes from the book. I think that the Catholic elements in the book are there are very easy to read elements, like Jonah and the whale in the episode where Pinocchio is swallowed by the fish. There is sort of symbolic Catholic hermetism in the book, so I was influenced by that. But we are almost a counter Pinocchio, because the Pinocchio was written at a time in which Italy needed unification, and Collodi had to exalt values like obedience, and transformation into that obedience granted you. But that was no longer the case in the 20th century. Obedience, I think, is not a virtue, frankly. Disobedience is a need and a virtue in these times where a lot of uniformity threatens to crush individuality. So my bet was for disobedience. And my bet was that Pinocchio didn't have to become a real boy. It was the story of Geppetto becoming a real father that was interesting to me.
That theme comes through the father-son relationship, um, the lessons from Sebastian J. Cricket. I love the little tip of the hat to Jiminy, but not really Jiminy.
It was actually Josephus.
Um, so the disobedience rings through not just with, you know, the obstinate boy, and you know he wants to go to church and he's gonna defy his father, but
Mhm.
also with what comes through in many of your movies, a very dark world that we're in, where war is everywhere, and the way he changes the puppet show for El Duce, it's throughout and it's wonderful.
No, he disobeys in a way that's there are elements that are very similar to Pan's Labyrinth. The girl is also a disobedient girl in Pan's Labyrinth, and that's why she has more of a conscience than the captain, you know. And Pinocchio disobeys fascism, disobeys the show business, disobeys even death, who says, you know, if you break the rules, you will become mortal. Because I think disobedience is a choice, and choice is what makes us human. And this is a theme that is repeated on many of my movies: Pans, Hellboy, Hellboy 2, many, Kronos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there are, in my opinion, there are very, the odds grow. He starts disobeying his father, then he disobeys Volpe, then he disobeys the Podesta, the fascist officer, and so forth. So they become bigger, and then finally he defies death and becomes a real boy, not by changing, but by actually sacrificing himself and choosing to save his father. So, you know, the parallels with Christ as a figure, and you know, that's another father and son story. You know, we do it visually with the nails on the back. He loses the same arm than the crucifix. He resurrects several times to save uh, those that he loves. And so there are many of those parallels. But I think uh, I'm a lapsed Catholic, but I definitely, what was very clear to me as a kid is that Jesus was disobedient, you know, and Jesus had the choice. Basically, the entire book of Kazantzakis, the last temptation of Christ, is let me save you, and you will have a normal human life. And Christ has to reject it. So, you know, I love Kazantzakis. He may have been an influence on this, but that's the idea.
Um, so I want to get to a couple more of the write-ins that the residents had done, and I expect shortly we'll get some phone calls as well. Helen wrote, she wants to comment on this movie as a treasure. Never thought I could fall in love with a little wooden boy, but Gregory Mann's voice filled your beautifully conceived main character with such warmth, joy of life that I was won over. The depth of the father-son relationship kept me emotionally involved, along with my appreciation of the amazing animation. Kudos to all.
Wow. Beautiful. I mean, look, it's a movie, the way I see it is a movie. I've always been interested in extremes. I've been interested in childhood and old age because I think those are the only interesting uh, moments for me in drama. I think that I felt 70 when I was 7, and I feel spiritually younger now than when I was a kid. But ultimately, these are moments in which the odds of the world are against us. You know, it's not only the fatigue of aging or the the incredible odds that you face as a child, but the fact that those two sides connect. If you see Kronos is the story of a grandfather and a granddaughter, and ends with the same image than Pinocchio. The father in the bed and the dawn filtering through the window and the child by the foot of the bed. Because I think there is something very full of love and forgiveness on Pinocchio. I was not a great father. I think I am a good father now. And I was not blessed with a perfect father. Nobody is. And this was the age in which I reconciled the identity of my father and my own identity as a father. And I didn't want to indict my father. I wanted to embrace him. And I wanted to embrace my mistakes as a father. And that's why the movie is defined by the cricket as a movie about imperfect fathers and imperfect sons. So there's a wave of love in the movie. There's an existential acceptance of the end, and the idea of life being precious because it's brief, and it's just full of a warmth and a humanity that is not saccharine.
Right.
No, it's actually very sweet in a very existential way.
And it is beautifully illustrated throughout, from the moment when you open and you know that Carlo is gone, to the very end when Stracciatore is coming up the hill behind Pinocchio and then he disappears and Pinocchio lays the flowers
Yeah,
on his tombstone. It's subtle in many ways, because it is still a movie that children are watching and will be influenced by. And I think the balance between something that's entertaining for the adult audience and an opportunity for an adult to heal and or grow are truly present in this movie.
definitely. We have been blessed by a huge audience. The movie is on one of the top charters of Netflix, but we did not make it. The way I defined it every time when they turned us down, I said it's not for children, but children can watch it, which is a very different notion. Meaning, I was not going to sacrifice any of the big ideas or the dark or undercurrents of the tale to sanitize it for kids. There's a lot of movies that are almost pasteurized and homogenized, like school lunches for kids, and that is very condescending, because if you think about the actual original movies of Disney, the ones that we consider the apex of Disney, they are full of darkness. Pinocchio is one of the scariest movies I ever saw.
I'm sorry, I was agreeing and I didn't hear you. Which one?
And Pinocchio is one of the scariest movies I ever saw as a kid. Bambi is incredibly violent, you know? So,
Beauty.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the dragon, that's a very scary scene.
And I think that Disney understood that in order for kids to piece together the world, I mean, he was a child of the Depression. He understood that the world was complex and that kids needed somebody showing them not just the.
Oh,
I think that the real lie is to show kids a sitcom, sort of screwball comedy world in which everybody's safe, everything is nice. That's a lie. This movie tries to approach truths.
yeah. We do have a caller, Richard.
Yes,
Go ahead.
yes. First of all, thank you. It's an honor to speak with you, Guillermo, this morning.
Thank you, Richard.
And on behalf of the residents and staff of MPTF, I must thank you for your beautifully crafted and nuanced interpretation of the Pinocchio mythology.
Thank you.
As you are well aware, most people's knowledge of the legend of Pinocchio is from the Disney's 1940 animated production, which is now 80 years in the past.
Yes.
Um, As George Gurdjieff and most brilliant men and women on earth have pondered the incredible enigma of existence, did you and Mark feel that this 140-year-old mythology was the perfect vehicle to create a new examination of the enigma of life, consciousness, and mortality?
Yes, the short answer is yes, in the sense that from the beginning, Collodi was interested in Hermetic knowledge, and it was Christian Hermetism, but I'm very interested from the beginning. I think Mark, Patrick McHale, everybody, we all agreed that this was the one that was worth tackling, because it's not just a rephrasing of the original tale, it's a reformulation of the principles of the initial tale. You know, they in many ways counter to the initial tale, as I said, but also it has an element that is very Mexican, which is to use death as an element to analyze life. So you know, I always quote a poem by Jaime Sabines, a Mexican poet, that says, "All of my life, a voice has whispered softly in my ear, live, live, live. It was death." And that's a very Mexican notion, that because none of us will come out of life alive, none of us, we better hang on to this very brief moment and try to decipher it. So many of my movies deal with what it makes us human, what makes us human. And they can be something as weird as Mimic or Hellboy, or they can be something like Pan's Labyrinth. But the question is, what makes us human? What is the difference between us and any other living creature? And I do think it's choice. You know, I think choice is the seat of the soul. And you know, the girl in Pan's Labyrinth has to choose to sacrifice her baby brother or herself. Pinocchio has to choose here. Hellboy has to choose to serve his origin or his raising, you know, nurture versus nature, you know, blah, blah, blah. And that's, again, the examination of Pinocchio. It is a lot more interesting to me when it's mythologically enhanced by the presence of death and the dialogue with death, which is unique to our version, I believe, you know. And, sorry, go ahead.
Your film is that you gave Pinocchio multiple lives, and the nuances of each one of those lives are very unique. It is not in any way similar to the myth that most people recognize as the Pinocchio mythology.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And the fact that to make sisters, life and death are sisters, and life is sort of quite casual or generous, but she doesn't follow through. She just gives life and walks away. And death actually teaches Pinocchio patiently. She becomes the mother figure, and she teaches Pinocchio calmly. Look, this is how you're going to have to choose. Be prepared. Immortality is a burden, you know, mortality is a gift. And this is very profound for me, because I do believe mortality is a gift. I mean, I'm 58 and I feel like I've lived already 8 lives. You know, the burden of time increases with every decade. And you feel, I'm not saying I'm going to be ready to exit. I don't think anyone is, but I will understand it. It will have the proper dimension. It helps you have a smaller sense of self, and therefore a more humble vision of the cosmos.
I have another resident on the line. I'm gonna see if we can get Ben to talk. Hold on.
Yeah, and thank you, Richard. Thank you for the call.
Thank you, Richard. Yes. Andrew, hold on a second. Ben?
Yes. Can you hear
Great.
me?
So Ben is on Zoom with us. Ben, you had asked a couple of questions over email, and I saw you here and thought you should ask them directly.
Yes, I'm just wondering how long it took to put the production together, and how much it cost, and how much the picture has grossed. And your picture is brilliant. I'm 88, and so I can appreciate what you have done, and it is probably one of the best animated films that I've ever seen in my life. And as an Academy member for 30 some years, I've seen a lot.
Thank you, Ben. I mean, at 80, you have seen a lot, you know, and when we were given the green light was approximately 5 years ago, but we had already done years of design and years of writing.
Mm.
So from the get-go to now, the shoot lasted more than 2 years, and we worked with about 1,000 days of shoot, and we worked with as many as 65 units, individual units, shooting at the same time, because an animator on a week turns 2 to 3 seconds of animation.
Right.
So to give you an example, Ben, of that, all the scenes between Pinocchio and death in the other side, all of them were animated by one animator, a Brazilian animator called Tiago, and they took over 2.5 years. So one animator did all those scenes, and for more than 2 years, he showed up every day to animate those scenes only.
Well, and the nice thing about stop motion is you can demand a lot of your performers, right?
Yes.
You can have multiple gangs working on the same time in different areas. I understand that much of the stop motion animation happened in Mexico, but there were teams in other places. Is that correct?
Yeah, largely the largest part of the animation happened in Portland, Oregon, and the scenes with the rabbits happened in Mexico. But we have animators from all over the world. As to Ben's question, the film, one of my conditions as the sort of protector of the creativity of the film, I asked that we never previewed this movie and that we never got any notes, and that we had complete freedom, and I exercised my final cut, which I've had for a decade or more. And the result is the movie was done in freedom, but in exchange, we had to do it, to Ben's question, for a number. Normally, a movie like this size in stop motion is over 100 million. We, pre-COVID, COVID cost more, but we were $50 million. And we don't have to gross money in that sense because we are Netflix. But I can tell you that the viewership on Netflix is right at the top. Like, we are one of the top most viewed movies at Netflix. They don't have box office to speak of.
Right. But it has been in the top for a couple of
A long time. Yeah, no, it's been in the top but it's millions upon millions of views. You know, they ask you not to divulge the exact numbers, but right at the top.
Right at the top. Okay, we have Andrew on the phone. Ben, thank you so much for your questions.
Thank
Good
you.
morning, Guillermo. I'm a big fan of your work. Pan's Labyrinth is one of your greatest films. You got my vote for the Producers Guild. You will win the Producers Guild Award. My question
Andrew,
is,
stop.
did you sneak in Guernica, your Guernica moment?
Yes.
Was that done consciously?
Well, very much so, because Guernica, the entire civil war in Spain was a rehearsal for World War II. And although the bombing of Carlo's church happens around the time of World War I, you know, which was a different proposition, a lot of the bombing during the Spanish Civil War was carried by Italian Air Force and German Air Force. the Nazi Air Force and the Condor Legion from Italy. So there is an echo of Guernica, absolutely, you know, and I think is very poignant to see that I tried to keep the war in the movie in the horizon. I think that if the war happened on camera, it upsets the balance of the story and the tone of the story. So I had to find a violence that could happen in the horizon by enemies unseen, because ultimately fascism and war affect us all, not because we're geographically close, but because we exist as a unit, as a human race. Like we have a war in Europe right now that is affecting the entire world. And the policies that are enacted in the White House affect every country and every state, no matter how far you are. And ultimately, the solution that I think was good was to show a proxy of the war in the war exercises of the children in the camp. This took the place of Pleasure Island in the original Pinocchio tale by Collodi, you know, and I thought it would be very poignant to do that. And since we couldn't show violence, I decided to do it with paint guns with the colors yellow and red, which are very vivid and shocking. But yes, to your question, I as you know, and I thank you, Pan's Labyrinth and Devil's Backbone both are situated in the Spanish Civil War, and the Condor Legion had a prominent role in the Spanish Civil War.
Thank you, Andrew, for that call. We have only a few minutes left. And there was another question about CGI, if there was any CGI that was part of this film, because obviously the stop motion is what
Yes.
many know about, but that was the question that came in.
The only CG that you have to do in a movie like this is with the ocean, the water, which would be impossible to solve physically, and some of the fire, and things like the rain between the lens and the objects. When the rain touches the puppets, we use museum gel, little balls of museum gel, and we animate them as drops of water. But if it's not touching the puppets, you put it as a layer of digital. But even then, our animation department guides the digital animation, and we do tests with real materials, simulating the water, simulating the fire, so that basically we art direct the CG to feel of a piece with the stop motion. But even things like that should have been done in stop motion because it would be easier, like when Pinocchio dismounts the bench and a bunch of popcorn flies from his popcorn bag, each of those popcorns was animated physically with a wire on each popcorn to guide the trajectory. So we animated beyond the measure of prudence. We animated physically everything we could and only resorted to digital when the physicality of it was impossible, like with water, fire, smoke.
I did watch the behind the scenes and I highly recommend it. It follows immediately if you're watching on Netflix. It's about 36 minutes and it is joyful because you can see all of the, hand animation going on. But you can also see the wires for where the knives that Geppetto kind of dances his way around,
Yes.
where they land. And I just thought that was so fascinating. And as I was watching the film, the water was
Yes.
captivating.
What is beautiful is we still use cranes to make the characters look like they're floating. We use miniature cranes for miniature elements. It's a handmade movie, and that's why we call it hand-carved cinema, because it has the charm of a hand-carved set, and it really quite moving to know that this was made by human hands. It is very analog to making a live action film. I say that we are to live action because we're shooting in real sets, real puppets, real props, real wardrobe, real cinematography. We are like Ginger and Fred. We do the same steps like the live action, but backwards in high heels. So it is a medium. Stop motion animation is a medium that is incredibly demanding and is not done enough because of that. It takes a long time, takes years of our lives. 12 babies were born in the production of this film.
And we haven't even talked about your voiceover talent. Some of the direction of the movie itself, it was expressed. Sorry, hold on one second. Hold on, please. Changed because of what you were hearing in the characterization.
Yeah. Ewan McGregor, particularly when we heard him, I immediately turned to Mark and said, "We gotta grow the role of the cricket." And then Patrick McHale and I did that, and we reboarded some sequences to include the cricket more. Kate Blanchett voicing a monkey, which is sounds completely insanely rich, and it was because she actually approached it and she said, "Look, this is, you have to explain me what the character feels. I'm not going to do it as an off, as a joke or a cameo." She took the role, and I think she gives incredible soul to that character. David Bradley, the perfection of the roles of Pinocchio and Geppetto, perfect for Gregory Mann and him. Tilda Swinton playing both life and death. John Turturro doing a little cameo. Ron Perlman, Finn Wolfhard is a luxuriant voice cast.
It was really a beautiful film. I've now had the opportunity. I made my husband sit down again and say, I have to watch it again. It's for work. He's very happy.
It's actually a movie that the more you watch, the more you find new things.
Yes. Yeah, because there's so much. It's so rich with color and, of course, characters that you look at them and say, "Oh, well, that's Guillermo del Toro." The rabbit, life, death. It's yeah.
No, thank you. I thank you for this, and I love the chance to talk to you guys.
It is our pleasure. We have Andrew on the phone. Andrew, one more quick question, and then I have a question that we ask everybody because we are already over time.
Yes,
sure.
Guillermo, as your exit, what's next?
Well, I am preparing, in terms of stop motion, I'm preparing to adapt a Kazuo Ishiguro novel called The Buried Giant, which deals with memory. And it's a much more adult book. It's not a fairy tale, but it has elements of fantasy. So it's very much like Pan's Labyrinth in that sense. I'm directing that hopefully in the near future, and trying to adapt a book that I've cherished all my life. Not sure if that's going to go right away or when it's going to go, but right now we are adapting The Buried Giant, and I'm working with Dennis Kelly, which is a great playwright from the UK that is partnering with me on the screenplay. And we have the blessing of Mr. Ishiguro, who is a Nobel Prize winner. And, we are starting some design and so on and so forth.
That's great. The question we ask everyone, what is your favorite film and what is your favorite television show? Because we are the Motion Picture and Television Fund.
To me, it's impossible to define my favorite film, but the two films that affected me the most as a kid, three actually, is Frankenstein, Pinocchio, and Creature from the Black Lagoon. And I think
you have all of them in this movie.
Yeah, two of them are connected very intimately.
Mm-hmm.
I think Frankenstein and Pinocchio are the same story, for different reasons and with different elements to add to the tale, but they are very much the story of my life. They are both autobiographical. They are stories of a child that had to find his way around the world morally, spiritually, ethically. And the father figure didn't provide any of the answers. But my favorite television show, I would have to say Night Gallery, the Rod Serling's anthology of horror stories. I value it above any others. I love Twilight Zone, but it's more sci-fi, and I'm not a sci-fi guy. I love horror. And another favorite of mine would be Jim Henson's The Storyteller, which is one of the most beautiful approaches to fairy tales anyone has done in any medium.
One of our residents was a writer on Twilight Zone and Night Gallery.
Wow. Well, those for me are golden examples of anthology writing. It's really hard to produce anthologies. I produced one last year, and now I know why they're not more frequent, but they are so enriching. And, he must have worked with Charles Beaumont and Richard Matheson, and there's such a huge amount of people I admire. Janot Swark as director, it is just Tom Wright as our director, and he did the paintings. I collect Night Gallery memorabilia. I have the doll from the episode The Doll, and I have 3 original paintings, no, 4 original paintings of Night Gallery, and it marked my childhood.
Cool. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. And when you're back in Los Angeles, please come. Come.
I will.
Bring some of the maquettes. We would love to see.
You know what? That's a commitment. I'll go, and the puppets will visit.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Guillermo del Toro, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.